Hi, my name's Maya, and last Tuesday, my own mother looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You're being selfish, Maya. It's the least you could do after everything we've done for you." Not, "How's your new job going?" Not, "Congratulations on your promotion." Just guilt wrapped in a bow, delivered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I wasn't asked to help my sister Rachel buy her dream house. I was told I would co-sign a $432,000 loan because family comes first. And apparently, my financial stability came dead last. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing I'd been groomed my entire life to be the family's financial safety net. Never the priority, always the backup plan. What would you have done when your own family cornered you in your childhood bedroom? Loan documents spread across your old desk, telling you that saying no would make you the villain. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The call came at 7:43 a.m. on a Thursday morning in September. I was in my downtown Phoenix apartment, barely awake, fumbling for my phone as it buzzed insistently on my nightstand. Rachel's name flashed across the screen, which was strange because my sister never called this early. She was more of a text at midnight when I remember you exist kind of person. "Maya, thank God you picked up." Her voice was breathless, almost frantic. "I need you to come home this weekend. It's important. Like, really important." I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the grogginess. "What's wrong? Is Mom okay? Dad?" "Everyone's fine, but we need to talk, in person, about an opportunity." The way she said opportunity made my stomach tighten. In our family, opportunities usually meant someone needed money. "Rachel, I just started this new position at the firm. I can't just, please, Maya. This could change everything for me, for all of us." Her voice cracked slightly, and I could hear something in the background, papers rustling, maybe voices. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't crucial. I stared at the ceiling of my bedroom, the morning light filtering through blinds I'd been meaning to replace for months. My sister and I weren't close. We weren't enemies, but we weren't confidants either. She was the artistic one, the free spirit who'd bounced between careers like a pinball. I was the responsible one, the one who'd worked 2 jobs through college, who'd built a career in commercial real estate from nothing. "What kind of opportunity, Rachel?" A pause. Then, "I found the perfect house. You remember the neighborhood we used to drive through when we were kids? Scottsdale Estates? There's a place there, Maya. It's everything I've ever dreamed of." Of course. A house. My jaw clenched involuntarily. "And you need money," I said. "Not really a question. It's not like that," she said quickly. "Well, not exactly. Look, just come home. Mom's making that pot roast you like. We can explain everything properly." Something about the way she said "we" sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just Rachel calling. This was a coordinated effort. I agreed to drive up to Flagstaff that Saturday, mostly because I hadn't seen my parents in 2 months, and partly because I knew if I didn't go, the guilt calls would start. Mom would call crying about how the family was falling apart. Dad would text those passive-aggressive messages about how success had changed me. The drive from Phoenix to Flagstaff usually cleared my head, but that Saturday the desert landscape felt heavier somehow. I kept thinking about Rachel's voice, the edge of desperation mixed with something else. Excitement, maybe even entitlement. My parents lived in the same ranch-style house where Rachel and I had grown up, on Maple Street in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The lawn was brown in patches, and Dad's old truck sat in the driveway next to Rachel's Honda Civic, which looked like it had been through a hailstorm. Mom answered the door before I could knock, pulling me into one of those hugs that lasted just a beat too long. "Maya, honey, you look thin. Are you eating?" "I'm fine, Mom. Where's everyone?" "Kitchen. We've been waiting for you." The house smelled like onions and herbs, exactly like it had when I was 12. But something felt different as I walked through the hallway lined with family photos, most of them featuring Rachel's various graduation ceremonies, art shows, and accomplishments. I'd never noticed before how few included me, or how in the ones that did, I was usually standing slightly apart from the group. In the kitchen, Dad sat at the head of the table, reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied some papers. Rachel was across from him, her laptop open, practically bouncing in her chair. The whole scene looked staged, like they'd been rehearsing. "There she is," Dad said, not looking up from whatever he was reading. "The big shot." "Jim," Mom warned gently, setting a plate of cookies on the table. "What? I'm proud of her. My daughter, the commercial real estate hotshot, making more money at 28 than I ever did." I sat down slowly, my eyes drifting to the papers spread across the table. Loan applications, property listings, financial statements. My stomach dropped. "So," Rachel said, closing her laptop, and leaning forward with that smile she'd perfected as a kid when she wanted something big. "I know this might seem sudden, but I've found my dream house." She launched into a presentation that felt rehearsed. The house was a 4-bedroom colonial in Scottsdale Estates, the same upscale neighborhood we'd driven through as kids, pressing our faces against the car windows to stare at houses that seemed like mansions. 3,000 square feet, a pool, a 3-car garage, and a price tag of $485,000. "It's below market value," Rachel said, sliding a printed listing across the table. "The sellers are motivated, but we have to move fast." I picked up the listing, studying the photos. It was beautiful, no denying that. Hardwood floors, granite countertops, a kitchen that belonged in a magazine. But beautiful and affordable were two different things. "Rachel, this is a $500,000 house. What kind of loan are you looking at?" "That's where it gets interesting," Dad interjected, finally looking up from his papers. "She's been pre-approved for most of it, $432,000 with a good interest rate." "Congratulations," I said, though something in his tone suggested there was more coming. "That's great news." "Well," Mom said, settling into her chair with that particular expression she wore when she was about to ask for something big. "There's just one tiny requirement from the bank." Rachel's smile faltered slightly. "They want a cosigner, someone with a strong credit history and steady income." The room went quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a neighbor's lawnmower. I looked from Rachel to Mom to Dad, all of them watching me expectantly. "You want me to co-sign a $432,000 loan?" I said slowly. "It's just a formality," Rachel said quickly. "I can afford the payments. I've been saving, and with my new job at the gallery, which pays how much?" Another pause. "It's commission-based, but Maya, you should see the client list. There's real potential for—" "How much, Rachel?" She looked down at her hands. "Right now, about $1,800 a month. But that's just starting out. In 6 months, maybe a year, $1,800. I did the math in my head. The mortgage payment on a $432,000 loan would be close to $3,000 a month, not including taxes, insurance, and maintenance. "Rachel, you can't afford this house." "That's not true," she said, her voice rising slightly. "You don't understand the art world. This gallery represents serious collectors. Last month, I helped sell a piece for $40,000. And your commission was? 8%, but... So $3,000 and change. Once. In a month, the room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dad cleared his throat. "Maya?" he said, his voice taking on that stern tone I remembered from childhood lectures. "Your sister isn't asking you to pay for anything. She's asking you to help her get her foot in the door. That's what family does. Family doesn't ask. Family to risk their financial future on a dream," I said, immediately regretting how harsh it sounded. Mom's face crumpled slightly. "Maya, honey," We raised you better than that. Rachel has been working so hard, and this is her chance to finally settle down, to build something real. With my credit and my financial liability. It's not like that, Rachel said, tears forming in her eyes. God, Maya, when did you become so cold? So calculating? This is my future we're talking about. And my credit score, my debt-to-income ratio, my ability to buy my own house someday. Dad leaned back in his chair, studying me with disappointment written across his features. You know, sweetheart, your mother and I sacrificed a lot to help you get where you are. College wasn't free. That car we bought you senior year wasn't free. The money we lent you for your apartment deposit in Phoenix, which I paid back. With interest, yes, but the point is, we invested in your future because we believed in you. Now Rachel needs that same investment, and you're sitting there with a calculator instead of an open heart. I felt the familiar weight of family guilt, settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. This was how it always went. Anytime I had boundaries, anytime I said no to anything, I became the selfish one, the ungrateful one who'd forgotten where she came from. What happens if she can't make the payments? I asked quietly. She will, Mom said firmly. Rachel is responsible. She's grown up a lot this past year. But what if she can't? Silence. Then I guess we'd have to figure something out, Dad said finally. As a family. Which meant me. It would fall to me to figure it out, to make the payments, to save everyone from the consequences of this decision I was being pressured to make. Looked around the table at these three people who'd shaped my entire life, who'd taught me about loyalty and sacrifice and putting family first. They weren't evil people. They weren't trying to ruin me. They genuinely believed this was reasonable, that asking me to risk hundreds of thousands of dollars was just what siblings did for each other. I need to think about it, I said. Rachel's face fell. Think about it? Maya, I told you we have to move fast. There are other offers coming in. Then maybe you should take one of those other offers more seriously. Or look at houses you can actually afford. I can afford this house, she said, her voice getting sharper. What I can't afford is a sister who's so worried about her precious credit score that she won't help family. The words hit harder than they should have. I stood up, my chair scraping against the linoleum floor. I'm going to get some air, I said. Maya, Mom called after me, but I was already heading for the back. Door outside, the September air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the faint smell of someone's barbecue. I sat on the old swing set Dad had built when Rachel and I were kids, the chains creaking under my weight. The swing set where Rachel used to make up elaborate games and stories, where she'd convinced me to help her dig for buried treasure that never existed. Through the kitchen window, I could see my family huddled around the table, probably strategizing their next approach. Rachel gestured animatedly, while Mom nodded sympathetically. Dad just sat there, arms crossed, looking like a man whose patience was wearing thin. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, staring at the numbers that represented years of careful saving, budgeting, and building credit. Numbers that could disappear overnight if this went wrong. But as I sat there in the gathering dusk, listening to the familiar sounds of my childhood neighborhood, I couldn't shake the feeling that this decision had been made long before I arrived. That I'd been cast in the role of family financier years ago, and saying no now would make me the villain in a story where I'd never gotten to write my own lines. The back door opened, and Rachel stepped out, wrapping her arms around herself against the cooling air. Can we talk? She asked, her voice softer now. Just you and me? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rachel approached the swing set slowly, like she was trying not to spook a wild animal. In the porch light, I could see she'd been crying. Her mascara was slightly smudged, and her eyes had that puffy look that came after tears. Maya, I'm sorry about what I said in there. About the credit score thing. That was unfair. I didn't respond immediately, just kept pushing myself gently back and forth on the swing. The chains made that familiar squeaking sound that had been the soundtrack to countless childhood conversations. You know, she continued, settling onto the swing next to mine. I used to come out here when we were kids whenever I was scared about something. Remember when I was afraid to start high school? You sat right here with me and told me everything would work out. Rachel, I'm scared now, Maya. Really scared. Her voice broke slightly. I'm 31 years old, and I feel like I'm still trying to figure out who I'm supposed to be. This house, this opportunity, it feels like the first real chance. I've had to build something solid, something that isn't just another false start. I looked at her profile in the dim light. Rachel had always been beautiful in that effortless way some people are, but tonight she looked fragile, uncertain. It reminded me of when she was 16 and had come home devastated after her first real heartbreak. Tell me about the gallery. Job? I said quietly. The real situation, not the sales pitch. She was quiet for a long moment, dragging her foot in the dirt beneath the swing. It's good. I mean, it's legitimate. Victoria Sterling, she's the owner. She's been in the art business for 20 years. The gallery represents some serious artists. But it's competitive. There are 3 other associates, and we're all essentially fighting for the same clients, the same commissions. Last month was good, but the month before that, I made $600. And the month before that, $400. So $1,800 a month isn't guaranteed. No, she admitted. But Maya, I know I can make this work. I've been studying the market, building relationships with collectors. There's this couple, the Hendersons. They're looking to invest in contemporary pieces. And if I can land them, as clients, if. She stopped swinging and turned to face me. Why are you being like this? Since when did you become so pessimistic about everything? Since I became an adult who understands that hopes and dreams don't pay mortgages. That's exactly what I'm talking about, she said, her voice rising slightly. When did you become so cold, so focused on worst-case scenarios? The Maya I grew up with used to believe in possibilities. I felt a familiar stab of guilt, the same feeling I'd carried since childhood whenever Rachel accused me of not supporting her dreams. She'd always been the dreamer, and I'd always been the practical one, the one who asked uncomfortable questions about her plans to become an actress, then a photographer, then a yoga instructor, then a jewelry designer. Rachel, I'm not trying to crush your dreams. I'm trying to understand the reality of what you're asking me to do. I'm asking you to believe in me, she said simply. The way family should. Before I could respond, the back door opened again. Mom stepped out, carrying 2 steaming mugs. I thought you 2 might want some hot chocolate, she said, handing us each a mug. Just like when you were little. I accepted the mug, wrapping my hands around its warmth. Mom had made it the old way, with real milk and cocoa powder, the way she used to when Rachel and I would come in from playing in the snow. You know, Mom said, settling onto the porch steps. Your father and I have been talking, and we understand this is a big decision for you, Maya. We don't want you to feel pressured. Rachel shot her a look that suggested this wasn't the script they'd agreed on. But, Mom continued, we also think you might not fully understand what this means to Rachel. This isn't just about a house, honey. This is about stability, about putting down roots. She's been drifting for so long, trying to find her place. This could be the thing that finally gives her the foundation she needs to build a real life. Mom, I started. Let me finish, sweetheart. We know you've worked hard for everything you have. We're so proud of what you've accomplished. But success isn't just about what you achieve for yourself. It's about lifting up the people you love. I sipped the hot chocolate, tasting childhood, and guilt in equal measure. What if she can't make the payments? Then we'll help, Mom said without hesitation. Your father and I have some savings. We could cover a few months if needed. How much savings? Another pause. Enough, she said, but something in her tone suggested it wasn't much. Rachel leaned forward eagerly. See, it's not all on you, Maya. We're all in this together. Family support system. But ultimately, I'm the one legally responsible. If the payments stop, if the house goes into foreclosure, it's my credit that gets destroyed, my financial future that takes the hit. That won't happen, Mom said firmly. We won't let it happen. I wanted to believe her. Part of me desperately wanted to trust that this would all work out, that Rachel would suddenly become financially responsible, that the gallery would provide steady income, that our parents' savings would be enough to cover any shortfalls. But I'd been the responsible one for too long to ignore the risks. Can I see the loan documents? I asked. Rachel brightened immediately. Of course, I have everything inside. Back in the kitchen, Dad had organized the paperwork into neat stacks. The loan application, pre-approval letter, property appraisal, and a cosigner agreement that made my blood pressure spike just reading the first paragraph. The cosigner would be responsible for the full amount of the loan in case of default. The cosigner's assets could be seized to satisfy the debt. The cosigner's credit would be impacted by any late payments. This basically makes me a second borrower, I said, looking up from the documents. It's standard language, Dad said dismissively. Legal boilerplate. The important thing is, you're helping your sister achieve her dreams. The important thing is that I understand what I'm signing up for. Rachel sat across from me, her hands clasped tightly on the table. Maya, I swear to you, I will not let you down. I will make every payment on time. I will work my ass off to make this gallery thing work. You won't regret this. What happens if you get sick or injured? What if the gallery closes? What if there's another economic downturn and people stop buying art? You're catastrophizing, Mom said gently. Those are all remote possibilities. Remote possibilities that would cost me nearly $500,000. The room fell silent again. I could feel their disappointment radiating toward me like heat from a fire. In their eyes, I was being unreasonable, selfish, unable to take a leap of faith for family. But in my mind, I was being practical. I was thinking about the years I'd spent building my credit, the discipline it had taken to save money, the career I'd worked to establish. All of it could be jeopardized by this decision. Maybe, I said slowly, there's a compromise. What if we looked at smaller houses? Something in the $200,000 or $300,000 range. Something you could actually afford on your current income? Rachel's face fell. Maya, you don't understand. This house, it's perfect. It's in the right neighborhood, it has the right feel. It's not just about square footage or price per bedroom. It's about creating the life I want to live. But you can't afford the life you want to live. Not yet, she said, her voice getting sharper. But I will. That's what investments are for. That's what taking risks is about. Taking risks with your own money, not with someone else's financial security. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. Enough, he said, his voice harder than I'd heard it in years. Maya, I'm disappointed in you. This is your sister we're talking about, your family. And you're sitting there acting like some kind of loan officer instead of a sister. I'm acting like someone who understands consequences. You're acting like someone who's forgotten where she came from, Dad shot back. We didn't raise you to be this selfish. The word hit like a slap. Selfish. The ultimate family weapon, the accusation that had been used to guilt me into compliance, since I was old enough to have my own opinions. Wanting to protect my financial future isn't selfish, I said, trying to keep my voice level. When it comes at the expense of your sister's happiness, yes, it is, Mom said sadly. Maya, honey, when did you become so focused on money, so worried about theoretical problems that might never happen? I looked around the table at these three people who genuinely believed I was being unreasonable, who saw my caution as coldness, my boundaries as betrayal. "I need some time to think about this," I said finally. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "How much time?" "Because the seller won't wait forever, and there are other buyers interested." "Give me until tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Dad shook his head. "Sweetheart, this is family. This shouldn't require overnight deliberation. It's $432,000, Dad. It requires whatever deliberation I think it needs." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor again. "I'm going to drive back to Phoenix tonight. I'll call you tomorrow with my decision." "Maya, wait," Rachel called out, but I was already heading for the door. As I walked to my car, I could hear muffled voices from inside the house, urgent, disappointed, planning their next move. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment staring at the house where I'd grown up, where I'd learned that love came with conditions, and that saying no made you the villain. The drive back to Phoenix was dark and quiet, filled with nothing but my own thoughts and the weight of a decision that felt like it would define not just my financial future, but my relationship with my family forever. By the time I reached my apartment, I'd made up my mind. But I also knew that tomorrow's phone call would change everything between us, one way or another. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel's tear-filled face, heard Dad's disappointed voice calling me selfish, felt the weight of Mom's gentle manipulation pressing down on my chest like a stone. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and made coffee, settling at my kitchen table with my laptop. If I was going to make this decision, I needed to understand exactly what I was getting into. I pulled up mortgage calculators, researched foreclosure procedures in Arizona, and dove deep into the legal implications of co-signing loans. What I found made my stomach churn. In Arizona, if Rachel defaulted, the bank could come after me immediately. They didn't have to wait, didn't have to try to work something out with her first. They could garnish my wages, freeze my accounts, and yes, eventually foreclose on any property I owned. The co-signer agreement wasn't just a formality. It was a legal document that made me equally responsible for nearly $500,000 in debt. But it was the next thing I discovered that changed everything. Around 4 a.m., unable to shake, a nagging feeling, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I looked up Rachel's financial history. Not to spy on her, but to understand the full picture of what I was being asked to guarantee. I started with public records, then moved to social media, then to professional networking sites. What I found painted a very different picture than the one Rachel had presented. According to LinkedIn, she'd been at the Sterling Gallery for only 3 months, not the year she'd implied. Before that, she'd worked at a coffee shop. Before that, a brief stint at another gallery that had apparently closed. Her employment history over the past 5 years was a patchwork of short-term jobs, gaps, and career pivots. But the real revelation came when I found her Instagram account. Rachel posted frequently, photos of expensive dinners, weekend trips, to Sedona, new clothes, art supplies that cost more than most people's monthly grocery budget. The timestamps showed these posts were recent, within the last few months while she was supposedly struggling to save for a house down payment. I scrolled through months of content, watching my sister document a lifestyle that clearly exceeded her stated income. Designer handbags, spa days, concert tickets, art classes that cost hundreds of dollars each. This wasn't someone who was carefully budgeting and saving every penny for homeownership. The most damning post was from just 2 weeks ago. A photo of Rachel at an upscale steakhouse in Scottsdale, celebrating closing my biggest sale yet, with what looked like a very expensive bottle of wine. The caption mentioned, "finally able to breathe a little," and "treating myself for once." If she'd just closed her biggest sale and could finally breathe, why was she desperate for me to co-sign a loan she couldn't afford? By 5 a.m., I had my answer. I And by 6 a.m., I was angry. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and spent the morning documenting everything I'd found. Screenshots of social media posts, employment records, timeline inconsistencies. Not because I planned to confront Rachel with them, but because I needed to organize my thoughts and understand exactly what kind of situation my family was trying to pull me into. The phone started ringing at 8 a.m. Maya, honey, did you sleep at all? Mom's voice was full of concern, but there was an underlying urgency that hadn't been there the night before. Not much, I admitted. Well, I have some good news that might help you make your decision. Your father and I talked all night, and we've decided we can contribute more than we initially thought. We can put up $20,000 as an additional safety net. $20,000. I almost laughed. That would cover maybe 6 mortgage payments if Rachel defaulted. Where are you getting $20,000, Mom? A pause. We have some savings we can access. The important thing is that you'd have even more security. What kind of savings? Another pause, longer this time. Well, we'd need to take a little bit from our retirement fund, but Maya, this is for family. This is for Rachel's future. My heart sank. Mom, you can't take money out of your retirement to guarantee a loan that Rachel probably can't afford. Probably can't afford? Maya, why are you being so negative about your sister? Because I spent all night researching her financial situation and discovered she's been lying to all of us, I thought, but didn't say. I just think this is a bigger risk than anyone is acknowledging. Risk is part of life, sweetheart. Nothing worthwhile ever comes without some risk. After we hung up, the calls kept coming. Dad called to tell me about a conversation he'd had with his buddy at the bank, who'd assured him that co-signer situations work out fine most of the time. Rachel called crying, saying she'd been up all night worried that I was going to abandon her when she needed me most. Each call made me more certain of my decision, but also more dreading the moment I'd have to voice it. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hey Maya, this is Tyler, Rachel's boyfriend. Can we talk? Tyler. I'd heard Rachel mention him a few times, but I'd never met him. Apparently, they'd been dating for about 6 months. I called the number back. Maya, thanks for calling me back. Tyler's voice was deeper than I'd expected, with a slight accent I couldn't place. Look, I know this might be weird, me reaching out, but I felt like I had to. Okay. Rachel doesn't know I'm calling you, and she'd probably kill me if she found out. But man, I can't let you sign those papers without knowing the whole truth. My grip tightened on the phone. What truth? She's been planning this for months, like specifically planning to get you to co-sign. She's got spreadsheets, Maya. Actual spreadsheets with different approaches for how to convince you. The room seemed to tilt slightly. What are you talking about? The house hunting, the gallery job timing, even the family dinner thing. It was all calculated. She's been studying your psychology, figuring out exactly what buttons to push to get you to say yes. I sat down heavily on my couch. Tyler, why are you telling me this? Because I care about her. And this is going to destroy her. She can't afford this house. Hell, she can barely afford her car payment. But she's convinced herself that once she gets into this house, everything else will magically fall into place. She thinks living in Scottsdale Estates will somehow transform her into someone who can afford to live in Scottsdale Estates. How do you know all this? Because I've been trying to talk her out of it for weeks. I've seen her credit card statements, Maya. She's got about $15,000 in credit card debt that she's been hiding from everyone. She's been using cash advances to pay for all those dinners and shopping trips she posts about. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture that made me feel sick. She thinks if she can just get into the house, she can figure out the rest later, Tyler continued. But what happens when she can't? What happens when the gallery doesn't work out? Or when she gets bored and wants to try something else? You're the one who's going to be stuck with a mortgage you never wanted. Does she know you disagree with this plan? We've been fighting about it constantly. She says I don't believe in her dreams, that I'm being unsupportive. But Maya, this isn't about dreams. This is about math. And the math doesn't work. After Guy, Tyler hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment for a long time. Everything made sense now. The urgency, the emotional manipulation, the careful orchestration of the family dinner. This hadn't been a spontaneous request for help. It had been a campaign designed to exploit my sense of family loyalty and my history of being the responsible one. At 2 p.m., my phone rang again. Rachel. Maya. I know you're still thinking about this, but I need you to know something. The sellers are getting impatient. They want an answer by tonight, or they're going to accept another offer. Rachel, we need to talk. Really talk. No parents, no pressure, just you and me. Of course. I've been wanting that all along. Can you drive back up here? No. You come to Phoenix. Meet me at that coffee shop on Central, the one near the Art Museum. You know the one. A pause. Why there? Because it's neutral territory. And because I want to have this conversation somewhere that isn't loaded with childhood memories and family pressure. Okay, she said slowly. I can be there in 2 hours. Good. And Rachel? Come alone. As I got ready to leave my apartment, I printed out everything I'd discovered. The employment records, the social media posts, the timeline inconsistencies. Not to ambush her with them, but to have them if she tried to continue the deception. I also wrote out my decision on a piece of paper, folded it, and put it in my pocket. Having it written down would make it harder to let guilt or manipulation change my mind in the moment. The coffee shop was busy with the afternoon crowd, students from the nearby college hunched over laptops, business people grabbing quick caffeine fixes between meetings. I chose a table in the back corner, somewhere we could talk privately without being overheard. Rachel arrived 20 minutes late, looking stressed and tired. She'd clearly been crying again, and she kept checking her phone as she walked toward my table. Sorry I'm late, she said, sliding into the chair across from me. Traffic was horrible. It's fine. Do you want to get something to drink? Just water. My stomach's been in knots all day. I got her a bottle of water and myself another coffee, using the few minutes to study my sister's face. She looked younger than her 31 years, vulnerable, in a way that reminded me of when we were kids, and she'd gotten in trouble for something. When I sat back down, she immediately launched into what sounded like a prepared speech. Maya, I want you to know how much this means to me. Not just the house, but the fact that you're even considering it. I know it's a big ask, and I know I haven't always been the most responsible person in the world, but I'm ready to change. This house represents a new chapter for me, a chance to finally— Rachel, stop. She looked at me with surprise. I need you to tell me the truth about everything. Your job, your finances, your real situation. No more sales pitches, no more manipulation, just the truth. Her face went pale. What do you mean? I've been telling you the truth. I pulled out my phone and showed her one of her Instagram posts, the expensive dinner from 2 weeks ago. This is from the same week you called me crying about not being able to afford groceries. She stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to find words that wouldn't come. Maya, she said finally, you don't understand. That dinner was a business meeting. A client was— Rachel, please, just stop lying. The words hung in the air between us. She looked down at her hands, her shoulders sagging like all the fight had gone out of her. How much do you know? She asked quietly. Enough. When she looked up again, there were tears in her eyes. But for the first time in days, she looked real. Not performing, not manipulating, just scared and ashamed and very, very young. I messed up, Maya. I messed up really bad. Rachel's admission hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire that had finally burned through all its fuel. She sat across from me, tears streaming down her face, no longer trying to maintain the facade she'd been performing for months. How bad? I asked quietly. She wiped her nose with a napkin, her hands shaking slightly. The credit cards? About 18,000. But Maya, that's not the worst part. My stomach dropped. What's the worst part? I already put an offer on the house. I told them you were going to co-sign. I gave them a deposit. How much of a deposit? $5,000. Rachel, where did you get $5,000 if you're $18,000 in debt? She looked away, toward the window where college students were walking by with backpacks and coffee cups, living the kind of carefree life that seemed impossibly distant from this conversation. I borrowed it from Mom and Dad. Last month. I told them it was for a security deposit on a cheaper apartment. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Not just that she'd lied to our parents, but that she'd been systematically deceiving everyone while positioning me as the selfish daughter who wouldn't help family. So let me understand this, I said, working to keep my voice level. You borrowed money from our parents under false pretenses, used it to put a deposit on a house you can't afford, told the seller I would co-sign a loan without asking me first. And now you're sitting here acting like I'm the one putting your dream in jeopardy? It's not like that, she said quickly. I mean, it is, but Maya, I was desperate. This house, it's not just about having a nice place to live. It's about proving to myself that I can succeed at something, that I'm not just the family screw-up who never gets her act together. So you decided to risk my financial future to prove a point to yourself? I thought you'd say yes. The words came out louder than she'd intended, causing a few people at nearby tables to glance over. She lowered her voice. You've always been the responsible one, the successful one. I thought, what's one more way for Maya to help her sister? What's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen is, I lose everything I've worked for when you inevitably can't make the payments. I can make the payments. Rachel, you just admitted your $18,000 in credit card debt and you lied to our parents to get deposit money. How exactly are you going to make $3,200 mortgage payments? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she looked up again, there was something desperate in her eyes that I'd never seen before. I've been talking to someone about a business opportunity. A chance to make real money. What kind of business opportunity? It's an investment thing. Multi-level marketing, but not like the scammy ones. This is legitimate. High-end wellness products, and the compensation structure is really generous if you work it right. My heart sank even further. Rachel, no. It's not what you think. My friend Jessica, she's been doing it for 6 months, and she's already making $4,000 a month. She says with my personality and my network, I could be making that within 3 months. Multi-level marketing is not a business plan. It's definitely not something you can count on to pay a mortgage. You don't know that, she said, her voice getting defensive again. You don't know everything, Maya. Just because you took the traditional path doesn't mean it's the only way to succeed. I leaned back in my chair, feeling exhausted. This conversation was revealing layers of delusion and poor judgment that I hadn't even suspected. Rachel wasn't just financially irresponsible. She was living in a fantasy world where houses paid for themselves and get-rich-quick schemes were viable career plans. What did Tyler tell you? She asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. What? Tyler called you, didn't he? I can tell. He's been trying to sabotage this whole thing because he's jealous that I'm trying to build something bigger than the life he wants. Tyler is concerned about you, just like I am. Tyler is threatened by my ambition. He wants me to stay small, to settle for some little apartment and a regular job and never dream of anything bigger. Or maybe Tyler sees the same thing I see, someone who's about to make a catastrophic financial decision based on magical thinking. Rachel's face hardened. Magical thinking? Maya, Do you know what magical thinking is? Magical thinking is believing that playing it safe and following all the rules guarantees you'll be happy. Magical thinking is thinking that just because you have a steady job and good credit, you're somehow better than people who take risks. I don't think I'm better than you, Rachel. I think I'm more realistic about money. You think you're smarter than me. You always have. The responsible sister and the flaky sister. Well, maybe I'm tired of being the flaky sister. Maybe I want to prove that I can build something big and successful too. Not with my money, you can't. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but they were true. Rachel flinched like I'd slapped her. So that's it then, she said quietly. You're going to let me lose the house. You never had the house, Rachel. You had a fantasy about a house you couldn't afford. The deposit isn't refundable, Maya. If I don't get the loan, I lose $5,000. $5,000 that isn't even mine. Then you shouldn't have put down a deposit before securing financing. I secured financing. You were supposed to be my cosigner. I was never supposed to be anything. You decided I would be your cosigner without asking me first. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Fine. You want to abandon your family? That's your choice. But don't pretend this is about being responsible. This is about you being selfish and heartless. Rachel, sit down. We're not done talking. Yes, we are. She grabbed her purse, her hands shaking with anger or desperation or both. I hope your perfect credit score keeps you warm at night, Maya. I hope your savings account makes up for having no heart. She turned to leave, but I called after her. What are you going to tell Mom and Dad? She stopped, her back still to me. I'm going to tell them the truth, that their daughter cares more about money than family. And what are you going to tell them about the $5,000 you borrowed under false pretenses? She turned around slowly, and for a moment, I saw not my manipulative sister, but a scared 31-year-old woman who had painted herself into a corner with no way out. I don't know, she whispered. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold and trying to process everything that had just happened. The conversation had confirmed my worst suspicions about Rachel's financial situation, but it had also revealed something deeper and more troubling, a level of self-deception and entitlement that made me question whether I really knew my sister at all. My phone started buzzing around 5 p.m. First a text from Mom. Rachel called crying. What happened? Then Dad. Your sister is devastated. Call me. Then Rachel herself. I told them everything. They're disappointed in both of us. I drove home through Phoenix rush hour traffic, my mind churning with anger, guilt, and a profound sadness about what this situation was revealing about my family dynamics. By the time I reached my apartment, I had 17 missed calls and 23 text messages. I ignored them all and ordered Chinese takeout, needing time to think before I dealt with the inevitable family crisis that was about to explode. But, around 8 p.m., my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw my father standing in the hallway, holding what looked like a manila folder. He was alone, which surprised me. I'd expected Mom to come too, or for this to be another coordinated family intervention. I opened the door. Dad. Maya. Can I come in? I stepped aside, and he walked into my living room, looking around like he was seeing it for the first time. He'd been to my apartment before, but rarely, and never alone. Nice place, he said, settling into my couch without being invited. You've done well for yourself. Thanks. What's in the folder? He held it up, studying the cover like he was seeing it for the first time too. Bank statements, credit reports, loan documents. Rachel asked me to bring these to you to prove that she can handle the mortgage. Dad? But I looked at them first, Maya. Really looked at them. Not just the summary she showed me and your mother. He opened the folder and spread the papers across my coffee table. Even from where I was standing, I could see columns of red numbers, past due notices, and account balances that told a story Rachel had been hiding from everyone. "She's in worse shape than she told us," Dad said quietly. "A lot worse." I sat down, across from him, studying his face. He looked older than he had just a few days ago, like the revelation about Rachel's finances had aged him in real time. "How much worse?" $27,000 in credit card debt across 6 different cards, 3 months behind on her car payment. And Maya. He picked up a piece of paper and handed it to me. "She was evicted from her last apartment for non-payment of rent. That's why she's been staying with that boyfriend." The paper was an eviction notice dated 4 months ago. Rachel had been telling everyone she'd moved in with Tyler because they were getting serious, not because she'd been kicked out of her own place. "Does Mom know?" Dad shook his head. "Not yet. Rachel begged me not to tell her, said it would break her heart." "So what's the plan now?" Dad was quiet for a long moment, staring at the financial documents spread across my table like evidence at a crime scene. "I don't know, sweetheart. For the first time in my life, I honestly don't know how to help your sister." Dad and I sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes, the weight of Rachel's deception settling between us like a third presence in the room. He kept picking up different papers from the folder, studying them as if the numbers might somehow change if he looked hard enough. 27 years, he said finally. "That's how long your mother and I have been trying to help Rachel figure out her life. 27 years of this time will be different, and I just need one more chance." I'd never heard my father talk about Rachel this way, with exhaustion instead of protective optimism. It was unsettling, like seeing a fundamental shift in the family dynamic happening in real time. "When did you start suspecting?" I asked. "Honestly, about a year ago. Maybe longer." He rubbed his forehead, a gesture I recognized from childhood when he was dealing with work stress. "She kept asking for small amounts of money, 50 here, 100 there. Always with a reasonable explanation. Car trouble, unexpected bill, work opportunity that required upfront investment." "You gave it to her?" "Of course we did. She's our daughter." But then the requests started getting more frequent, and the explanations started getting more elaborate. He held up a bank statement. "This shows she bounced 4 checks in the past. 2 months. 4. You know what that tells me? That she's not just bad with money. She's actively hiding how bad things are." "Exactly. And Maya, if she's lying to us about something as basic as having enough money in her checking account, what else is she lying about?" My phone buzzed with another text from Rachel. "Dad's been gone for an hour. What are you two plotting against?" "Me?" I showed Dad the message. He shook his head sadly. Even now she thinks this is about plotting against her instead of trying to help her. Maybe because she knows the help she needs isn't the help she wants. Dad looked at me sharply. "What do you mean?" "I mean, Rachel doesn't want help managing her finances or finding a more stable career or dealing with her debt. She wants help maintaining a lifestyle she can't afford while avoiding the consequences of her choices." That's a harsh way to put it. But is it wrong? Dad was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed Mom. "Helen, it's me. Yes, I'm still at Maya's place. No, we're not ganging up on Rachel. Helen, listen to me. I need you to sit down." I could hear Mom's voice through the phone, asking rapid-fire questions, the pitch getting higher with each one. "The eviction notice, Helen. She was kicked out of her apartment 4 months ago. No, she didn't tell us. There's more." What followed was one of the most difficult conversations I'd ever witnessed. Dad methodically went through each revelation: the credit card debt, the bounced checks, the MLM scheme, the deposit money she'd taken under false pretenses. I could hear Mom crying on the other end, her voice breaking as she asked questions Dad couldn't answer. "How did we not know?" she kept repeating. "How did we not see this?" When Dad finally hung up, he looked like he'd aged another 5 years. "She wants to drive down here," he said. "Tonight. She says we need to have a family meeting. What kind of family meeting? The kind where we figure out how to help Rachel without enabling her to destroy herself. An hour later, Mom was sitting in my living room, clutching a box of tissues and staring at the same financial documents that had shattered Dad's illusions. She looked smaller somehow, like the revelation about Rachel had physically diminished. Her. I don't understand, she kept saying. I talked to her just last week. She seemed fine. She was excited about the gallery, optimistic about the house. How could she seem so normal when things were this bad? Because she's gotten very good at lying, I said gently. Don't say that about your sister. Mom, look at the evidence. This isn't accidental financial mismanagement. This is systematic deception. She's struggling, Maya. There's a difference. Struggling people don't post Instagram photos of expensive dinners while claiming they can't afford groceries. Mom's face crumpled. She's been posting what? I reluctantly showed her some of Rachel's recent social media posts. Mom scrolled through them with growing horror, seeing the disconnect between the lifestyle Rachel was projecting and the financial crisis she was hiding. The spa day, Mom whispered, pointing to a post from 3 weeks ago. She told me someone gave her a gift certificate for her birthday. But her birthday was 6 months ago. Mom, I said carefully, I think Rachel has been lying to us about a lot of things for a lot longer than we realized. Before Mom could respond, my doorbell rang. Again. Through the peephole, I could see Rachel standing in the hallway, her face red and puffy from crying. Tyler was with her, standing slightly behind her with his hands in his pockets, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I opened the door. Family meeting without the family? Rachel said, pushing past me into the living room. How exactly does that work? She stopped short when she saw the documents spread across my coffee table, her face going pale. You went through my private financial information? She said, turning on Dad with an anger I'd rarely seen from her. Information you asked me to bring to convince Maya to co-sign your loan, Dad replied evenly. I asked you to bring the summary sheet, not my entire financial history. Rachel, Mom said, standing up and reaching for her daughter. Honey, we're just trying to understand. Understand what? That I'm not perfect like Maya? That I've made some mistakes? That I'm not the golden child who never needs help? We're trying to understand how you got to the point where you thought deceiving your entire family was preferable to asking for actual help, I said. Rachel whirled around to face me. Asking for help? I did ask for help. I asked you to co-sign a loan and you acted like I was asking you to donate a kidney. You asked me to risk $500,000 to enable your fantasy life. It's not a fantasy. It's an investment in my future. Rachel? Tyler spoke up for the first time, his voice quiet but firm. We talked about this. You can't invest in a future you can't afford. Oh, so now you're ganging up on me too? Nobody's ganging up on you, Dad said. We're trying to have an honest conversation about your situation. My situation is that I need help, and instead of helping me, you're all sitting around judging me and going through my personal business behind my back. Your personal business became family business when you asked Maya to legally guarantee your debt, Mom said, her voice shakier than I'd ever heard it. Rachel sat down heavily in my armchair, suddenly looking exhausted. So what now? You've all decided I'm a terrible person who can't be trusted. What's the verdict? The room went quiet. I looked at my parents, both of whom seemed to be struggling with the same question. How do you help someone who refuses to acknowledge they need a different kind of help than what they're asking for? The verdict, I said carefully, is that I'm not going to co-sign the loan. I know that already. You made that clear this afternoon. But, I continued, I am willing to help you in other ways. She looked up at me with something that might have been hope. I'll pay for financial counseling. Good financial counseling, not some free seminar, but actual professional help to get your debt under control and create a realistic budget. I'll also help you find a more stable job. I have contacts in different industries. People who might be willing to give you a chance if you're serious about making changes. The gallery job is stable. Rachel, Tyler said gently, you made $600 last month. It's building. These things take time. And while you're building your art career, I continued, I'll help you find a part-time job that provides consistent income. Something to pay the bills while you pursue your passion projects. So your idea of helping me is to make me give up on my dreams? My idea of helping you is to give you a foundation stable enough that you can pursue your dreams without destroying your life. Mom leaned forward. Honey, maybe Maya is right. Maybe we need to think about this differently. You too, Mom? You're going to side with her? I'm not siding with anyone. I'm trying to figure out how to help you without making things worse. Rachel looked around the room at all of us, her expression shifting from anger to something closer, to desperation. What about the deposit money? She asked quietly. I'll lose $5,000. Money you borrowed from Mom and Dad under false pretenses, I pointed out. I didn't lie. I needed it for housing. You told them it was for an apartment security deposit, not a house down payment. It's the same thing. No, Rachel, it's not. And you know it's not. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she looked up again, there were tears in her eyes, but also something I hadn't seen in years. What looked like genuine vulnerability instead of performed emotion. I'm scared, she whispered. I'm 31 years old, and I feel like everyone else figured out how to be an adult except me. I see people my age buying houses and having careers and building real lives, and I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. The admission hung in the air, more honest than anything she'd said in months. The house felt like proof that I could do it too, she continued, that I could be successful and stable and grown up like everyone else. But Rachel, Mom said gently, you can't buy your way into being grown up. It doesn't work that way. Then, how does it work? Rachel asked, and for the first time in the entire conversation, she sounded like she genuinely wanted to know the answer. I looked at Dad, who nodded slightly, giving me permission to say what we were all thinking. It works by making decisions based on reality instead of hopes. It works by living within your means while you build toward your goals. It works by being honest with people who care about you instead of trying to manipulate them into enabling your mistakes. Rachel flinched, but she didn't argue. And it works, I continued, by accepting help with what you actually need help with, not just what you want help with. What do you think I actually need help with? I looked around the room at my parents and Tyler, all of whom were watching. This conversation with the intensity of people witnessing something they'd waited years to see. I think you need help learning how to be honest with yourself about money. I think you need help finding work that pays you enough to live on. And I think you need help figuring out the difference between dreams worth pursuing and fantasies that are going to destroy your life. Rachel was quiet for a long time. Finally, she looked up at Tyler. Do you think she's right? Tyler reached over and took her hand. I think she's trying to help you in a way that will actually work long-term instead of just postponing the crisis. She turned to Mom and Dad. What do you two think? Mom was crying again, but she managed to speak. I think we've been helping you avoid consequences instead of helping you learn from them. And I think that was our mistake as much as yours. Dad nodded. I think it's time for all of us to try a different approach. Rachel took a deep, shaky breath. Okay, what would that look like? What followed was the most honest family conversation we'd had in years, maybe decades. For the next 2 hours, we sat in my living room and laid out a realistic plan for Rachel's financial recovery. Not the fantasy rescue she'd been hoping for, but actual practical steps that might help her build a stable life. I pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes as we talked through each element. First, I said, we need to deal with the immediate crisis. Rachel, you need to call the seller tomorrow morning and withdraw your offer on the house. What if they won't refund the deposit? Then you'll lose $5,000. But that's Better than defaulting on a $400,000 loan? Dad cleared his throat. The $5,000 came from our savings account. If it's not refundable, we'll consider it a very expensive lesson for all of us. Mom looked at him in surprise. Jim, that's our vacation fund. Helen, if losing our vacation fund helps our daughter learn to make better financial decisions, it's the best investment we've ever made. Rachel started crying again, but this time it seemed like relief rather than frustration. I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to affect you guys. We know, honey, Mom said. But it did affect us. And going forward, we need to think about that before making decisions. Tyler spoke up. What about the MLM thing? She's supposed to buy a starter kit tomorrow for $1,200. Absolutely not, I said immediately. Rachel, you're not buying into any multi-level marketing schemes. Not now, not ever. But Jessica said, Rachel, Dad interrupted, Jessica is not your financial advisor. Jessica is someone trying to recruit you into her downline so she can make money off your sales. How do you know that? Because I spent 30 years in sales, and I know the difference between a job opportunity and a recruitment scheme. I wrote cancel MLM on the legal pad in capital letters. Second, I continued, we need to get your debt under control. $27,000 across 6 credit cards is a crisis, not a minor setback. I know it sounds like a lot. It is a lot. At minimum payments, you'll be paying for 20 years and end up paying twice that in interest. Tyler pulled out his phone. I've been researching debt consolidation. There are some legitimate companies that can help combine everything into one payment with a lower interest rate. That's a good start, I said. But Rachel, you'll also need to cut up all but one credit card and commit to not using it except for genuine emergencies. What counts as a genuine emergency? Medical bills, car repairs, not dinners at expensive restaurants or spa days or art supplies. Rachel looked uncomfortable. What if there's a work opportunity that requires some upfront investment? Then, you save up for it with cash, or you decide it's not an opportunity you can afford right now. Mom leaned forward. Honey, I think what Maya is trying to say is that borrowed money shouldn't be used for speculative investments. Everything is speculative to some degree. No, I said firmly. Your rent isn't speculative. Your car payment isn't speculative. Your groceries aren't speculative. Those are fixed expenses that have to be paid every month, regardless of how your art career is going. I wrote, debt consolidation plus credit card elimination on the pad. Third, you need consistent income. The gallery job isn't providing that. I've only been there 3 months. And in 3 months, you've made less than $2,000 total. Rachel, McDonald's pays more than that. Tyler nodded. We've talked about this. You could work at McDonald's part-time and make more money with more predictable hours. So, you want me to give up on art and work fast food? We want you to work fast food while you figure out how to make art profitable, I said. There's a difference. But if I'm working at McDonald's, when will I have time to build my gallery career? Nights and weekends, the same time most people work on their side hustles. Rachel was quiet for a moment. This feels like you're asking me to give up everything I care about. We're asking you to be realistic about timing, Dad said. You can still pursue art, but you need to eat and pay rent while you're pursuing it. I wrote stable part-time job on the legal pad. Fourth, I continued, you need to move somewhere you can actually afford. Tyler, what's your rent situation? I have a 2-bedroom place. She's been staying with me, but we haven't talked about making it official or splitting costs. Rachel, what would half of Tyler's rent be? About $600. Can you afford $600 a month in rent plus your share of utilities? She did the math in her head. If I get a part-time job, probably. Probably isn't good. Enough. Let's be specific. If you work 25 hours a week at $15 an hour, that's $1,500 a month before taxes. After taxes, maybe $1,200. Can you live on $1,200 a month? If I'm careful. What does careful mean? Break it down. Tyler pulled out his phone again. Rent would be $600. Utilities maybe $50. Car payment is $240. Car insurance is $90. Phone is $60. That's already over $1,000, I pointed out. And we haven't talked about food, gas, minimum credit card payments, or any kind of emergency fund. Rachel looked deflated. So, I can't even afford to live with Tyler? You can't afford to live anywhere until you get your debt under control. And establish consistent income, I said. Which brings us to option 5. Which is? I looked at Mom and Dad. You move back home temporarily. Pay your parents $300 a month in rent, focus on paying down debt and building savings, and use the stable environment to establish better financial habits. The room went silent. Rachel stared at me like I'd suggested she move to Mars. Move back home? I'm 31 years old. And you're 31 years old with $27,000 in debt and no stable income. Your age doesn't change the math. I can't move back home. What would people think? People would think you're making responsible choices to get your life back on track, Mom said gently. Honey, there's no shame in taking a step back to move forward. Tyler, what do you think? Rachel asked. Tyler was quiet for a long moment. I think if we're going to build a future together, it needs to be based on reality. And the reality is that you need time to get your finances sorted out. Are you breaking up with me? I'm saying I support whatever you need to do to get healthy financially. If that means living with your parents for a year, then that's what it means. Rachel looked around the room at all of us. So this is the plan? I give up the house, move back in with my parents, get a job at McDonald's, and abandon everything I've been working toward? You abandon the fantasy and start working toward something achievable, I said. Rachel, you're not giving up on art. You're giving up on the idea that you can live like a successful artist before you've actually become one. What's the difference? The difference is that successful artists pay their bills. She was quiet for several minutes, staring at the legal pad where I'd written out the plan. Finally, she looked up. What if I don't want to do this? What if I decide to keep the house offer and find another cosigner? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Then you do that, I said. But you do it without any financial help from me, Mom, or Dad. No more loans, no more bailouts, no more emergency funds. You'd just cut me off? We'd stop enabling you, Dad said. There's a difference. But what if I really get into trouble? What if I can't pay rent or buy food? Then you'd face the natural consequences of your choices, Mom said, her voice shaking slightly. And maybe that's what you need to finally understand, that actions have consequences. Rachel looked shocked. In 31 years, our parents had never drawn a hard line like this. They'd always been the safety net, the fallback plan, the source of last resort funding. You're serious? We're serious, Dad said. Rachel, we love you, but we've realized that our way of loving you has been hurting you. We've been protecting you from consequences instead of helping you learn from them. But what if the plan doesn't work? What if I move home and get a regular job and I'm still miserable? Then you'll be miserable with less debt and more savings, I said, which gives you more options for changing things. And what if I hate living at home? Then you'll have motivation to get your finances sorted out as quickly as possible so you can move out again. Tyler reached over and took Rachel's hand. Rachel, look at me. Do you want to keep living like this? Do you want to keep worrying about money every single day? Keep lying to people you care about. Keep making promises you can't keep. She shook her head, tears starting again. Then try something different. Give this plan a real chance. Rachel looked around the room one more time, her eyes stopping on each of us. And if I do this, if I follow this plan, you'll all support me? We'll support you in making good decisions, Mom said. We won't support you in making the same mistakes over and over. What does that mean practically? It means we'll help with job applications and budgeting and finding resources for debt counseling, I said. But we won't lend you money for non-essentials or co-sign loans you can't afford or pretend that hope is a financial strategy. Rachel took a deep breath. Okay, I need to think about this. Can I have until tomorrow to decide? You can have until tomorrow to decide whether you want our help with this plan, Dad said. But the offer to co-sign the house loan is off the table permanently, regardless of what you decide. And the boundary about not lending money for non-essentials starts now, Mom added. Whether you take our help with the plan or not, Rachel nodded slowly. I understand. She stood up, Tyler beside her. We should go. I need to process all of this. As they headed toward the door, Rachel turned back one more time. Maya? Thank you for not just signing the papers to make everyone happy. Thank you for finally being honest about what's really going on. After they left, the three of us sat in my living room, emotionally exhausted, but oddly relieved. For the first time in years, we'd had a family conversation based on truth instead of wishful thinking. Do you think she'll actually do it? Mom asked. I think she'll try, Dad said. And for the first time in years, I think we've given her a plan that might actually work. What if she doesn't? I asked. What if she decides to find another co-signer? Or just keeps making the same mistakes? Dad and Mom looked at each other, some kind of silent communication passing between them. Then we'll stick to our boundaries, Mom said. It'll be hard, but we'll do it. Even if she ends up homeless or in serious trouble? Maya, Dad said quietly. She's already in serious trouble. The difference is, now she knows we're not going. To help her avoid the consequences anymore. As I cleaned up the financial documents scattered across my coffee table, I realized something had fundamentally shifted in our family dynamics. For 31 years, Rachel had been the child who needed protecting, and I'd been the responsible one who was expected to provide that protection. Tonight, for the first time, we'd all agreed that protecting Rachel from consequences had been hurting her more than helping her. The question now was whether Rachel would accept help building a real life, or whether she'd choose to keep chasing fantasies on her own. Either way, I'd finally learned the difference between supporting family and enabling them. And I wasn't going back. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed different moments from the family meeting. Rachel's face when she realized we'd all seen through her deception. Mom's tears when she understood how long the lies had been going on. Dad's quiet disappointment, as he acknowledged his role in enabling her. But more than anything, I kept thinking about Rachel's final question. What if she decides to find another co-signer? At 6 a.m., my phone started buzzing. Text after text, all from numbers I didn't recognize. Is this Maya? Your sister gave me your number. I'm interested in the co-signer opportunity. Hi, Rachel told me about the house situation. I might be able to help with financing. Maya, this is David Chen from Pacific Trust Lending. Your sister mentioned you were unavailable to co-sign, but we have other options. By 7 a.m., I had 12 messages from strangers, all somehow connected to Rachel's house purchase. My stomach sank as I realized what was happening. Instead of withdrawing her offer or accepting our plan, Rachel had spent the night shopping for a replacement co-signer. I called Tyler. Maya, thank God you called, he answered on the first ring. I've been trying to talk her out of this all night. Out of what exactly? She found someone willing to co-sign, some guy named Kevin who she met through the MLM group. Apparently, he's convinced this is a good investment opportunity. My blood ran cold. Tyler, please tell me she hasn't signed anything yet. She's meeting him at the bank at 9. Maya, I tried everything. I told her about our conversation last night, reminded her about the plan we all agreed on. She said the plan was just everyone trying to control her life. Where is she now? She left about an hour ago. Said she needed to handle some business before the bank meeting. I hung up and immediately called Rachel. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. On the third try, she answered. Maya, I know you're upset, but I found a solution that works for everyone. Rachel, where are you? I'm at Starbucks near the bank, going over paperwork with Kevin. He's really nice, and he understands that sometimes you have to take risks to build the life you want. Rachel, listen to me very carefully. You cannot do this. Why? Because you don't approve. Maya, I appreciate everything you said last night, but I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions. What did you tell Kevin about your financial situation? Pause. I told him what he needed to know. Which was what exactly? That I have a stable job at an art gallery and that I'm looking for a co-signer to help me qualify for better loan terms. Did you tell him about the $27,000 in credit card debt? Another pause, shorter this time. That's not relevant to the house purchase. Rachel, it's fraud. If you misrepresent your financial situation to get someone to co-sign a loan, that's legally fraud. I'm not misrepresenting anything. You're lying by omission and you're putting this Kevin person at risk for a debt you cannot pay. I could hear voices in the background, then Rachel speaking quietly to someone else. Kevin, can you give me just 1 minute? Rachel, I said urgently, please don't do this. Come home. Let's implement the plan we talked about. You don't have to figure everything out today. The plan where I move back in with my parents and work at McDonald's? That's not a plan, Maya. That's giving up. It's not giving up. It's being realistic about where you are so you can get to where you want to be. Where I want to be is in my own house, building my career, living like an actual adult. And where you'll end up is destroying some stranger's credit and probably facing criminal charges when the whole thing falls apart. It won't fall apart. Kevin believes in me. Kevin doesn't know you. Kevin doesn't know that you've been evicted, that you've bounced checks, that you've been lying to your family for months about your finances. I haven't been lying. Rachel, yes, you have. And now you're about to lie to Kevin. The line went quiet except for the background noise of the coffee shop. Finally, Rachel spoke, her voice smaller than before. What if this is my only chance? Maya, what if I don't get another opportunity like this? Then you create other opportunities, better opportunities, ones that don't require deceiving people or risking financial ruin. But what if I can't? What if I try your plan and I just end up stuck forever, living with my parents, working some dead-end job, never getting ahead? Then at least you won't be dragging innocent people down with you. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but they seemed to hit home. Rachel was quiet for a long moment. I have to go, she said finally. Kevin's waiting. The line went dead. I immediately called, Dad. She's about to co-sign with some stranger, I told him without preamble. Someone from her MLM group who doesn't know her real financial situation. Jesus Christ, Dad muttered. Where? First National Bank downtown. They have a meeting at 9. I heard Dad talking to Mom in the background. Then he came back on the line. We're driving down there now. Dad, I don't think there's anything we can do to stop her if she's determined to go through with it. Maybe not, but we can make sure this Kevin person knows what he's getting into. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in the parking lot of First National Bank, watching the entrance for any sign of Rachel. Dad's car pulled up next to mine, and he and Mom got out looking grim and determined. Any sign of her? Dad asked. Not yet. It's only 8:30. We waited. At 8:45, Rachel's Honda pulled into the parking lot. A man got out of the passenger side, tall, maybe 40, wearing a business suit that looked expensive. He was carrying a briefcase and talking animatedly to Rachel as they walked toward the bank entrance. That must be Kevin, Mom said quietly. We intercepted them at the entrance. Rachel, Dad said, his voice firm but not angry. We need to talk. Rachel stopped short, her face cycling through surprise, embarrassment, and anger. What are you doing? Here? Trying to prevent you from making the biggest mistake of your life, I said. Kevin looked confused, glancing between Rachel and the rest of us. Rachel, is everything okay? Who are these people? This is my family, Rachel said, her cheeks flushing red. And they're trying to interfere with my business. Kevin, Dad said, extending his hand. I'm Jim Peterson, Rachel's father. I think there are some things about my daughter's financial situation that you should know before you sign any paperwork. Kevin shook Dad's hand uncertainly. Rachel mentioned her family was unsupportive of her real estate goals. We're unsupportive of financial fraud, I said bluntly. Kevin, has Rachel told you about her current debt load? Maya, Rachel snapped. Has she mentioned that she was evicted from her last apartment? Or that she's bounced multiple checks in the past 2 months? Kevin's expression changed, becoming more guarded. Rachel, what is she talking about? My sister is trying to sabotage this because she refused to co-sign for me herself. Kevin, Mom said gently, our daughter has over $27,000 in credit card debt. She makes less than $2,000 a month at her current job. She cannot afford the mortgage payments on this house. Kevin turned to Rachel, his face serious now. Is that true? Rachel's composure finally cracked. It's more complicated than that. Is it true that you have $27,000 in debt? Yes, but is it true that you make less than $2,000 a month? Right now, yes. But my income is growing, Rachel. Kevin's voice was firm, but not unkind. Why didn't you tell me this? Because it's not relevant. The debt is separate from the house payment, and my income situation is temporary. Everything about your financial situation is relevant when you're asking me to guarantee a $400,000 loan. Kevin closed his briefcase and took a step back from the bank entrance. I'm sorry, Rachel. I can't do this. Kevin, please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You misrepresented your situation, and now I find out from your family that you've been evicted and you're bouncing checks. That's not someone I can afford to co-sign with. He turned to my parents. Thank you for telling me. I appreciate your honesty. As Kevin walked back to his car, Rachel stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching her last hope drive away. When she turned around, her face was a mixture of devastation and rage. Are you happy now? She said, tears streaming down her cheeks. You've destroyed everything. We saved that man from a financial disaster, Dad said quietly. And maybe we saved you from criminal fraud charges. I wasn't committing fraud. You were lying about material facts to induce someone to take on financial liability, I said. That's literally the definition of fraud. Rachel sank down onto a bench outside the bank, her head in her hands. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Mom sat down next to her. You do what we talked about last night. You accept help with a plan that actually works. But the deposit money? I'm going to lose $5,000 of your savings. Yes, Dad said, sitting on Rachel's other side. You are, and that's a consequence you'll have to live with. What if the seller sues me? Then you'll deal with that too, I said, with a lawyer if necessary. But Rachel, these are the consequences of the choices you made. No one else can fix them for you. She looked up at me, mascara streaking down her cheeks. So, what happens now? Now you call the seller and withdraw your offer. You move back home. You get a real job. You start paying down your debt. And you stop looking for shortcuts that require other people to risk their financial security. And if I don't? Then you figure it out on your own, Mom said, her voice shaking but determined. Without any help from us. Rachel was quiet for a long time, staring at the bank entrance where her dream had just died. Finally, she pulled out her phone. I need to call the real estate agent, she said quietly. Do you want us to stay with you? While you make the call? Dad asked. She shook her head. No, this is something I need to do myself. As she dialed the number, I realized this was the first time in years that Rachel was taking responsibility for her own mess without asking someone else to fix it for her. It wasn't the ending she'd wanted, but it was the beginning she needed. 6 months later, I was sitting in my Phoenix office when my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "First month I've paid all my bills on time and had money left over. Thank you for not signing those papers." I stared at the message for a long moment, remembering the devastated woman who'd sat outside the bank that day, calling to withdraw her house offer while tears streamed down her face. The transformation hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when I wondered if we'd made the right choice in forcing her to face reality. The first month after the bank incident was brutal. Rachel moved back into her childhood bedroom, which she described as the most humiliating experience of my adult life. She oscillated between genuine attempts at change and angry outbursts about how the family had ruined her life and crushed her dreams. The breakthrough came when she started working at a local Target. It wasn't glamorous, 30 hours a week at $16 an hour, folding clothes and helping customers find toothpaste. But it was steady income, and for the first time in years, Rachel knew exactly how much money she'd have each week. "You know what's weird?" she'd told me during one of our weekly check-in calls. "I actually sleep better now. When I was at the gallery, I'd lie awake every night wondering if I'd make enough commission to pay rent. Now I know I'll make exactly $480 before taxes every single week." There's something to be said for predictability. The debt consolidation had been harder to arrange than we'd expected. With Rachel's credit score in the low 500s, most legitimate companies wouldn't work with her. But Tyler had helped her research nonprofit credit counseling services, and she'd eventually found a program that consolidated her cards into a single payment of $520 per month. "It'll take me 4 years to pay off," she'd told me. "But at least I can see the finish line now." Living at home had forced Rachel to confront habits she'd been hiding for years. With Mom and Dad watching her spending, she couldn't impulse buy expensive coffee or new art supplies. She had to ask permission to use the car, which meant accounting for where she was going and when she'd be back. At 31, it felt infantilizing, but it was also the structure she'd never learned to create for herself. "I realized I never actually learned how to be an adult," she'd confessed during one of our monthly family dinners. "I learned how to look like an adult, pay some bills, hold down jobs for a while, rent apartments, but I never learned how to actually manage money or plan for the future or make decisions based on reality instead of hope." The gallery had let her go after 2 weeks of missed shifts when she started at Target. Victoria Sterling, the owner, had been surprisingly understanding. "She told me to come back when I had my life together," Rachel had said. "Not as an employee, but maybe as someone who could afford to actually buy art instead of just hoping to sell it." Tyler had been Rachel's strongest supporter through the transition, which surprised everyone, including Rachel herself. Many relationships don't survive one partner moving back in with their parents, but Tyler seemed relieved that Rachel was finally addressing her financial chaos. "He told me he'd been walking on eggshells for months," Rachel shared. "Always worried about when the next financial crisis would hit, when I'd need to borrow money or couldn't pay my share of something. He said watching me get my act together was like getting his girlfriend back." The most unexpected change was in Rachel's relationship with our parents. Living at home as an adult, paying rent, and contributing to household expenses had shifted. The dynamic from parent-child to something more like housemates with shared history. "Your sister has become a different person," Mom had told me during one of our private conversations. "She's still creative, still dreams big, but now she talks about plans instead of fantasies. She's saving up to move back out, and she has actual numbers. How much she needs for a security deposit, what kind of apartment she can afford, how long it will take to save up." Dad had been even more dramatic in his assessment. "For the first time in 20 years, I'm not worried about Rachel anymore." But the real proof of change came in month 4, when Rachel faced her first major financial test since moving home. Her car had needed expensive brake repairs, $800 that she didn't have in her checking account. The old Rachel would have panicked, borrowed money from family, or put it on a credit card. The new Rachel had called me to discuss her options. "I have $300 in my emergency fund," she'd said. "I can borrow the other $500 from you and pay you back $50 a month for 10 months. Or I can take the bus for a few weeks and save up the full amount. What do you think makes more sense?" I'd been so shocked by the question, Rachel asking for financial advice instead of demanding a bailout, that I'd needed a moment to respond. "What do you think makes more sense?" I'd asked. "Honestly? Taking the bus for a few weeks. I hate the idea of going backward on debt, even family debt. And it's only temporary." She'd taken the bus for 3 weeks, saving every extra dollar from her Target paychecks until she could pay cash for the brake repair. It was a small thing, but it represented a fundamental shift in how she approached problems. The text I'd received that morning was the latest in a series of small victories. Rachel had been tracking her finances obsessively, celebrating every month she managed to stick to her budget, every debt payment she made on time, every dollar she added to her slowly growing emergency fund. I called her back. "Congratulations on the good financial month," I said. "How does it feel?" "Boring," she laughed. "And amazing. I never realized how much mental energy I was spending on money stress. Now that I actually know where my money goes every month, I can think about other things." "Like what?" "Like the fact that I've been taking art classes at the community college. Not expensive ones, just $60 per semester. And I've been working on a series of paintings about financial recovery. Sounds weird, but they're actually pretty good. Are you planning to sell them?" "Maybe eventually. But Maya, here's the thing. I don't need them to sell. I'm not counting on them to pay my rent or buy my groceries. They're just something I'm doing because I love it, not because I'm desperate for income." This was perhaps the biggest change in Rachel, the separation of her artistic passion from her financial survival. When she'd been depending on art sales to pay bills, every creative decision had been filtered through desperation. Now that her basic needs were covered by steady employment, she could create for the joy of creating. "I think I understand now why you wouldn't co-sign the loan," she continued. "It wasn't because you didn't believe in me. It was because you knew I wasn't ready to succeed." "What do you mean?" "I was trying to build a life I couldn't afford with money I didn't have while lying to everyone about my situation. That's not success. That's a house of cards waiting to collapse. You saved me from a much bigger disaster, and you saved yourself by accepting help with what you actually needed instead of what you wanted." "Yeah. Though I have to admit, there are days I still dream about that house in Scottsdale Estates." "That's normal. What matters is that you're not willing to destroy your life to get it anymore." "Actually," Rachel said, and I could hear the smile in her voice, "I drove by there last week. You know what I realized? It wasn't even that nice. The pictures made it look better than it was, and the neighborhood felt pretentious and sterile. I think I was more in love with the idea of living there than with actually living there." After we hung up, I sat in my office thinking about how dramatically our family dynamics had changed in 6 months. The crisis had forced all of us to confront uncomfortable truths about Rachel's relationship with money, about our parents' enabling patterns, and about my own tendency to protect people from consequences instead of helping them learn from mistakes. The most surprising outcome was how much stronger our family relationships had become. When everything was based on truth instead of deception, when help was offered for realistic goals instead of impossible fantasies, we could actually support each other effectively. Rachel still lived at home, but she was actively saving for her own apartment. She still worked retail, but she was also taking business classes at the community college, exploring more sustainable ways to build a career around art. She still struggled with money sometimes, but she handled those struggles with planning and communication instead of panic and deception. Most importantly, she'd learned the difference between dreams and fantasies. Dreams were goals you worked toward with realistic plans and sustainable steps. Fantasies were escapes from reality that required other people to pay the price for your wishes. 3 weeks after our phone conversation, I got another text from Rachel. Just signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment. Moving out next month. Paying for it entirely with money I saved. Feels like winning the lottery. The apartment was a modest place in Tempe, nothing like the Scottsdale mansion she'd originally wanted, but it was hers, paid for with her own income, furnished with her own savings. She'd earned it through months of discipline, honesty, and hard work. At the family dinner celebrating her move, Rachel raised her glass of water. She'd given up expensive wine along with other unnecessary expenses and made a toast. To learning the difference between what you want and what you can afford. To family that loves you enough to tell you the truth. And to Maya, who saved my life by refusing to sign those papers. Dad raised his glass. To second chances and new beginnings. Mom wiped away tears. To dreams that don't require lying to achieve. And Tyler, who'd stayed with Rachel through her entire financial transformation, smiled and said, to building something real instead of just pretending. As I looked around the table at my family, flawed, complicated, but finally honest with each other, I realized that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst impulses. Sometimes helping people means letting them face the consequences of their choices instead of protecting them from reality. Rachel had wanted me to co-sign a loan that would have destroyed both our financial futures. By saying no, I'd forced her to find a better path. It hadn't been the path she'd wanted, but it was the path she'd needed. And 6 months later, she was building a life she could actually afford, pursuing dreams that didn't require other people to pay the price, and making plans based on truth instead of fantasy. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the word no, especially when they're asking you to help them lie to themselves about what's possible. Rachel learned that lesson the hard way, but she learned it. And that made all the difficult conversations, all the tears, all the anger, worth it. She'd finally learned how to dream responsibly. And that's a skill that will serve her for the rest of her life. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.